Hello and welcome back. Today we look at Birmingham Prison's most notorious inmates. As you probably already know, first we will be looking at a little bit of history and then looking at the inmates. If you'd rather just go straight to the inmates, all the timestamps are in the description. Birmingham Prison used to be called Winson Green Prison. It's a Victorian-built prison and was completed in 1849. There was a gallows and 42 executions took place. The first ever inmate sent to the gallows was on the 17th of March 1885. He was called Henry Kimberley and he was 51 years old. He took the life of Emma Palmer. The last was on the 20th of November 1962 and it was Jamaican Oswald Augustus Gray who took the life of Thomas Bates. There has been a long history of the prison having very bad facilities, as well as the treatment of inmates being horrendous. This dates back to 1853, when there was a high number of inmates taking their own lives. An inquiry soon followed and it found gross neglect and routine prisoner abuse that included starvation, excessive use of the straitjacket and forcing prisoners to work a machine in their cells for no reason except to force them to complete hard labour. It was featured heavily in the news for being one of the first prisons to force feed the suffragettes. The prison being in the headlines didn't stop. In the 90s, it was known to be very lenient on inmates. There was an accusation that one inmate took a holiday abroad to Spain while on a weekend leave and returned a week later. In 1999, it had a review by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, and it was described as one of the worst prisons they had ever seen. In the report, it mentioned its lack of ex-offender treatment programs, the lack of employment and education opportunities. It also mentioned the inadequate washing arrangements, where some inmates were only being allowed a full wash 3 times a week. There has also been a running theme of extremes, being too easy on prisoners on one hand or severely abusive on the other. In 2001, it was recorded 11% of inmates had claimed to have been assaulted by prison officers. One particular incident involved a mentally disturbed prisoner who had been denied a wash or change of clothes for weeks because staff thought he was faking his illness. In 2002, to help the prison, it received a huge investment. 450 additional prisoner places were added together with new workshops, facilities, a new healthcare centre and gym, as well as extensions and improvements to the existing facilities. The next report, a couple of years later, was positive. The investment had worked, it was going in the right direction and inmates had a positive outlook. The same as many of the other prisons we have looked at, Birmingham is severely overcrowded. In 2007, it noted that it was putting prisoners and staff at risk because of the negative history, even with the new investment. The ownership then changed hands. It was no longer under control of the government, but became the UK's first private prison. G4S formally took over the day-to-day runnings of the prison in October 2011 to try and tackle some of the historic issues that it suffered. Shortly after taking over the operation of the prison, G4S had to spend $500,000 replacing all the keys and locks in the prison. The feelings of those that are held at Birmingham Prison didn't really change throughout the years. The conditions were awful, there was a lack of food, not being given the appropriate items like basic things, bedding, towels, low staff, overcrowding and being locked in cells sometimes all day, and this created frustration, especially to those prisoners who were incarcerated in 2016. On the 16th of December 2016, a prison officer was rushed by inmates, leading to a rapid escalation of what prison officials described as trouble. The breakdown began after inmates seized control of fire hoses and began breaking lights. Prison staff attempted to lock down inmates in their cells. However, during the operation, an officer's keys were stolen. Security staff were ordered to evacuate the wing. An injured prisoner was used as bait to encourage officers to unlock doors. One inmate in the prison's G wing, which was reserved for ex-offenders during the riots, reported that during the disturbance, rioting inmates had attempted to gain access to that section of the facility, and the prisoners were terrified that they would be attacked. On the Friday evening, specialist riot squads from His Majesty's Prison Service were dispatched to assume control of the situation due to the scale of the disturbance, which had grown to involve more than 600 inmates. By late that day, prison officials were back in control of the facility. 460 prisoners were moved to other prisons, and those prisoners also caused issues at Hull Prison. The riot caused about £2 million worth of damage. This again led to an inspection. Inspectors found violence and the use of illegal substances was still a huge problem. Prisoners still felt unsafe. It described problems including overcrowding, with prisoners facing cramped conditions in Victorian cells, also cockroach and rat infestation. There was a high rate of sickness with prison officers, and the prison has trouble retaining staff. Some staff would lock themselves in their offices, and parts of the prison was filthy, with vomit and rat droppings on the floor. Assaults by prisoners had been rising, with an average of 3 assaults a week on staff, some serious. There have also been assaults and serious assaults by prisoners on other prisoners. Drones were used to bring in substances into the prison. In June 2016, inspectors said prison violence was increasing because of the large amounts of substances. In autumn 2016, concerns were expressed about the substances which can make prisoners violent. G4S, who run the prison, claimed a very small minority of the staff are corrupt. They also said that these substances were brought in by visitors and by drones that were flown over the prison walls. In 2017, 1,147 assaults, including fights, were recorded at the prison. This was higher for any other prison in England or Wales that year. The first complete year that G4S ran the prison was horrendous. Prisoners effectively ran the wings, staff were afraid to leave their offices, and inspectors said NHS staff felt unable to enter some wings due to large amounts of substances. Thankfully, it has had some improvement. It still has a bad reputation, but more funding was put in. Today, learning programs are provided by Novus, and this includes basic and key skills of bricklaying, plumbing, painting and decorating, forklift truck training, industrial cleaning, catering, textiles, barbering, information technology, business, creative arts and performing arts. All courses can lead to qualifications. They can also take this education further and get a degree from the Open University. They have a stocked library and can go to the gym. They have PE on a daily basis over a 7-day period, and on the evenings over 5 days. The latest inspection was in 2023, and it noted a crackdown on serious staff corruption. It noted that violence had fallen by more than 60% at the institution. They noted a world of difference between the broken windows, piles of rubbish and cramped conditions that they had previously seen. The improvement it stated the prison needed to make were prisoners needed to get more help when they arrived, prisoners to have more time out of their cell, prisoners to feel safer, cell bells to be answered more quickly, prisoners to have more support from their key worker, the prison to do more to help prisoners who don't speak English, the prison needed more nurses, medicine to be given out safely, and a continuation of good educational courses for the inmates. As it stands today, it's a Category B men's prison. It has 1,028 inmates. Now that we have done a little bit of the history, let's get straight into our cases. And first we start with Matthew Falder. He was born on the 24th of October 1988 in Cheshire. He was from an upper middle class family and was well educated. Throughout his school life he excelled. He attended Clare College of the University of Cambridge. He specialised in oceanography and he earned a master's and a doctoral degree. He was working as a researcher and lecturer at the University of Birmingham. He had a decent family life and a good group of friends. He was described as sociable, funny and outgoing, but there was another side to him. As bubbly as he was, behind closed doors he liked to delve into the internet. His social media profiles showed he loved baking, 3D printing and taking selfies, but this was all a mask. He spent a lot of time on the dark web using grotesque sites and forums. He was a pedophile. He had a double life. As popular as he was to his friends and family, he was as popular to other users on these websites. This cult of wrongings were into something called hurtcore. They would look at and share images of extreme SA against women and children. He was very well liked by those other people on the forums because he would brag about how you could get these images. His use was the internet. He used many sites, especially buy and sell sites like Gumtree, as well as forums. He would pick his victims carefully, using his fake profile, posing mainly as a girl called Liz, but he had at least 70 different profiles. He interacted on forums that were used by those who were in bad circumstances, those that were vulnerable. On Gumtree, he would contact minors offering babysitting or dog walking. Instead, he would offer thousands of pounds for a not safe for work photo, claiming he needed life drawings to sketch for his therapy. He made it more believable by saying Liz was depressed and an artist. After receiving these images from the minors, he would then blackmail them, telling the children he would send the photos to friends, schoolmates, or their family. To prevent this from happening, he would make them send him humiliating photos. This included the blackmailed victims eating dog food and licking toilets. He would also constantly message the victims, letting them know there was no escape from him, with the threat of releasing these images online or to friends and family if they didn't send the photos he wanted. What he didn't know is that the FBI were closing in. Agents first began in the United States in 2013. The FBI worked to expose users of the dark web. Specialists built their own websites on the servers which hosted the offending sites to track what was being said and done on them. They were able to access the self-called hurtcore communities on the dark web. It was called Hurt to the Core. It was described by the NCA as the world's worst website. The users had many profiles, but his linked back to who he really was. His profile, In the Garden, posted blackmail pictures of a teenage girl. The user was tracked online and found to also post many other photos online, as well as use Gumtree. They found that this user had many different names, acting as a female, and had at least 30 different email addresses, encrypted via services which originated in Russia. The thousands of pounds that he promised for the not safe for work photos were never paid. Once he got the photos, the abuse started. Once he received these photos, he would then post on these forums where they could be seen by countless members of a global child SA network. They monitored him, investigating further, and saw him communicating under other profiles as well as with other people, suggesting they avoid using money but instead using vouchers to get kids to trust you. They found lots of victims of In the Garden were based in the UK and had already reported it to the police, but there was not enough evidence to identify who was behind the username. His other accounts on the dark web were 666devil, and he used a picture of a young girl as his icon on the forum, claiming she was his daughter. He had planned to do things to her and dubbed it Hell Week. He also requested ideas from other members of what he could do. They accessed his accounts and realised that the poster on these forums was the same person, 666devil, In the Garden, an evil mind, and that whoever they were, they had approached more than 200 victims worldwide, including victims living in America, the UK, Australia and Israel. Special task force involving the NCA, GCHQ, Homeland Security, the Australian Federal Police and Europol were set up to specifically enhance evidence gathering against the suspect. By the end of March 2017, intelligence linked a person of interest to an address in Birmingham. Falder was identified as a suspect in April and placed under surveillance for 3 months. He was filmed on the train using his laptop and going to and from work. On the 21st of June 2017, plainclothes officers were deployed to arrest him. They arrested him at his workplace. He was handcuffed in his office at the University of Birmingham. He described the charges against him as the rap sheet from hell. 2 of his devices were immediately seized, revealing what the NCA called significant evidence. They showed that his offending went back to 2009, when he was a 21-year-old student. Police found these early voyeurism offences took place on a total of 8 occasions, involving 13 victims. When they entered his home to search, it was absolutely chaotic. It was a complete mess. A PC and laptop were also found, and they had double layers of encryption. Speaking with victims, at least 4 tried to take their own lives. The organisations from around the world worked together, eventually deciding to prosecute him in the UK. On the 16th of October 2017, he was charged with 137 offences, making him one of the country's most prolific paedophiles. He was given 32 years in prison. He was ordered to serve a further 6 years on extended licence after his release. If the parole board believes that he continues to pose a danger to the public or to children, he may have to serve the full 32 years in prison. He appealed his sentence and, shockingly, it was granted. In 2018, his term was reduced from 32 years to 25 years. He remains in Birmingham prison. Now we look at Lawrence Jones. He was born on the 1st of August 1968 in North Wales. At 7 years old, he won a scholarship and he attended Durham School. He left home at the age of 16 and moved to Manchester. He had previously worked as a hotel pianist. When he moved to Manchester, he formed UK Fast with his wife Gail in 1999. It was a cloud hosting business operating a data centre complex in Trafford Park. The business grew bigger and bigger with 350 employees. In 2013, the business turned over 23.4 million. Jones acquired a Swiss ski resort in September 2014. In June 2017, Jones launched a podcast offering business advice and sharing inspirational stories from people that included Gary Neville and Sir Richard Branson. In 2018, a 30% stake of UK Fast was sold to a private firm. On the 31st of October 2019, the news reported Lawrence Jones quits UK Fast following misconduct allegations. This mogul's empire started to crumble. It was then reported that Gail Jones, his wife, took over his responsibilities. Then in May 2020, it was reported that both had now left the business, and this was because of his criminal activity. This report stated in 2019, Jones faced multiple allegations by former employees of bullying, harassment and SA. Many of the allegations included claims of unwanted physical contact and verbal abuse in the workplace whilst on trips abroad. On the 1st of November 2019, Greater Manchester Police confirmed that they had interviewed Jones in relation to 2 allegations of SA and that inquiries were ongoing. In January 2021, Jones was charged with 1 count of R and 4 counts of SA. In April 2021, he was charged with a further count of R. His trial began in November 2023 at the Manchester Crown Court in relation to 2 counts of alleged R, said to have taken place in the 1990s. On the 1st of December 2023, he was sentenced to a total of 15 years in prison and was ordered to sign the S Offenders Register for life. All in all, he received a 14-year sentence for one of the R's, a 7-year jail term for the second, and a 12-month consecutive sentence for the SA. He was actually previously convicted in January 2023 of assaulting a female employee. He is being held in Birmingham prison. Third on this list is Fred West, who is probably one of the most infamous criminals in the UK alongside his wife Rose West. He was born on September 29, 1941. He was one of 6 children and was reported to be his mum's favourite. There have been theories he was SA'd as a child by his mother, but this was never confirmed. Actually, the only thing West told police was that his father did this to his sisters, but again, this was never proven. He was described as a nice boy with a very cheeky side. He left school early as he didn't do well, and by the age of 17 he worked on a farm. He had a motorcycle accident which left him with a metal plate in his head. There have been some theories that this affected his impulse control. He committed petty crimes, but his first real serious allegation was in 1961. He was accused of getting a 13-year-old girl pregnant. She was a friend of the family. He was kicked out of the family home and they never spoke to him again. He went on trial for the R and was charged with child molestation. He got no prison term. His defence was he was suffering fits as a result of his head trauma. His first wife was Rena Costello. She was pregnant with another man's child. His stepdaughter was called Charmaine and was born in March 1963. In 1964 they had their first child together, their daughter Anna Marie. They then made friends with Anna McFall, and at this point they lived in Gloucester and moved Anna there. The marriage broke down and his wife moved back to Scotland and left the two girls with Fred West. Anna McFall lived with West in a caravan and she became pregnant. She wanted West to marry her and divorce his wife. Instead, he took her life and placed her near the caravan park. Throughout this time, multiple SA offences were committed by Fred West, with the description fitting him, but he was never linked undeniably. Rena, his wife, then returned after Anna disappeared, but by 1968 he met Rose Letts, who had become his wife Rose West. Rose's father hated Fred West and even contacted social services, but this didn't matter. Rose became pregnant with their first child. By this point, Rena had returned to Scotland. West was sent to prison on various petty theft and fine evasion charges. Rose was left with her two stepdaughters and gave birth to her daughter Heather in 1970. In 1971, while Fred was in prison, Rose took the life of her 8-year-old stepdaughter, Charmaine. Rena came looking for her daughter. The couple had no explanation why she suddenly disappeared. Fred West then took his first wife's life and placed her in the area of the caravan park near Anna McFall. Rose and Fred West had a second child, May, in 1972 and moved to 25 Cromwell Street. Rose worked as a lady of the night. Fred West used the cellar as a place to commit acts on young girls, with Rose helping him. He'd R'd his own daughter, Anna Marie. She was threatened with her life if she told anyone. They employed a nanny, Caroline Owens, who was 17 years old. Before they took her life, she escaped and went straight to the police. In 1973, Fred West went on trial, but he was never charged. He convinced the judges that it was consensual. Rose and Fred received no prison term and got fines instead. Rose then had their son, Stephen, Louise in 1978, Barry in 1980, and Rosemary Jr. in 1982. The last child was Luciana in 1983. It's believed that Fred West may not be the father to all the children because of their activities and Rose being a lady of the night. The children were controlled heavily. They used this to make sure they never told a soul of what they may see inside the house. Over the years, the couple R'd and took the lives of 8 young women. Anna Marie, their daughter, moved out as she got older, so the couple turned their attention to their younger daughters. Heather resisted and told friends of what she was suffering, and because of this they took her life and placed her with the other victims at 25 Cromwell Street. They also R'd and attacked women, and this eventually led to the police investigating the couple. Detective Constable Hazel Savage led a search at the house in August 1992, and they found images and clear evidence of abuse. Fred West was arrested of R of a minor and Rose for assisting in the R of a minor. The police then stumbled upon the disappearance of Heather and Charmaine. The younger children were taken into care. They then searched the house further and the police found remains. Fred West cooperated with the police, telling them the names of the victims as well as the 3 placed in locations outside of the home. Rose West claimed that she was also a victim, but the evidence showed that this was a lie. On December 13th, 1994, Fred West was charged on 12 counts of murder and taken into custody at Birmingham Prison. He never went to trial. He was found in his cell after taking his own life on the 1st of January 1995. Rose West was found guilty on 10 separate counts of murder on the 22nd of November 1995. She received a life sentence, having to serve a minimum of 25 years in prison. Next we move on to Charlie Wilson, who was born on the 30th of June 1932 in Battersea in London. He was a well-built man described as being very handsome. He fell hard into the criminal world. He was a thief who would buy shares in various gambling enterprises. He was in and out of prison for a small amount of time for petty crimes. His biggest crime was committed with his childhood friends, Jimmy Hussey, Tommy Wisby, Bruce Reynolds and Gordon Goody, as well as friends he met along the way, Buster Edwards, and 2 car thieves, Mikey Ball and Roy James. These criminals wanted the big money. Small thefts and little shares just wasn't enough, so they began planning the bigger crime. In 1960, Wilson began to work with Reynolds and planned to get into a criminal big league. In 1962, a gang led by Reynolds stole $62,000 in a security van robbery at London Heathrow Airport. They then robbed a Royal Mail train at Swindon, which netted £700, but this still wasn't enough, so they started to plan a train robbery. This is known as the Great Train Robbery. At 6:50 p.m. on Wednesday the 7th of August 1963, the Travelling Post Office Up special train set off from Glasgow to arrive in London at around 4 a.m. the following morning. The gang tampered with line-side signals to bring the train to a halt. The gang, led by Bruce Reynolds, attacked the train. Once the robbers had entered the carriage, the staff couldn't really put up a fight. There were no police officers or security guards on board to assist them. The staff were then made to lie face down on the floor in a corner of a carriage. All but 8 of 128 sacks were transferred in about 15 to 20 minutes. The sacks were placed in a truck. The gang also had 2 Land Rover vehicles, both which had the same registration, to confuse the police. The gang then headed along minor roads listening for police broadcasts on a VHF radio. The journey took around 45 minutes to an hour, and they arrived back at Leverslade Farm at around 4:30. The full shares came to around 150,000 each. Following a tip-off from a herdsman who used a field which was next to the farm, a police sergeant and a constable called there on the 13th of August 1963, 5 days after the Great Train Robbery. They found fingerprints at the farm, and an informant then gave the police a list of names. 8 of the gang members and several associates were caught. Charlie Wilson was one of them. Wilson was the gang's treasurer who gave the robbers their cut of the money. He was soon captured, and during his trial in April 1964, he was given the name Silent Man, as he refused to say anything at all. He was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. But just 3 months into his sentence, he escaped the prison. Police claimed Wilson, who was 32 years old at the time, was freed by a gang of 3 men who broke into the prison during the early hours of an August morning in 1964. These gang members said to have stolen a ladder from a nearby builder's yard and climbed over Birmingham prison walls from the neighbouring All Saints Mental Hospital. He then went to Canada to be with his wife and children. Having successfully evaded recapture for 4 years, Wilson was caught on the 24th of January 1968 after his wife telephoned her parents in England. This then enabled Scotland Yard to track them down. Returning to England, he served 10 more years in prison. After serving the 10-year sentence, he moved to Spain with his wife and children. The police suspect he had a huge involvement in smuggling substances. On the 23rd of April 1990, Wilson was at home in Spain with his cousin and his wife. A man unknown to them knocked the door. His wife Pat Wilson opened it. This unknown man, in a London accent, asked to speak to Charlie Wilson, as he had a message from Eamon Evans. This unknown man had a baseball cap pulled down, shielding his eyes from view. Pat got him to leave his bike near the front door and let him go out to the back garden to talk to her husband, Charlie Wilson, who was preparing a barbecue dinner to celebrate their wedding anniversary. After 5 minutes of conversation, this unknown man attacked Charlie Wilson and took his life. This unknown man then jumped over the back fence and then escaped. The culprit has never been found, but it's believed to be because of smuggling of substances and criminal deals. It was planned very carefully to only take Wilson's life and leave his wife alive. Now we look at our first female case, who we have covered previously, Dorothea Waddingham, who was born on the 16th of April 1936. She was known as a nurse, but she had no qualifications. In 1925, under the name Dorothea Nancy Waddingham, she married Thomas Leach. He was twice her age and very unwell. During their marriage, she served 2 prison terms for fraud and for theft. Her husband passed away and she started seeing Ronald Joseph Sullivan. Whilst living with Sullivan, she began to take in elderly patients and turned her home at 32 Devon Drive into a nursing home. 2 of the patients she looked after were Louisa Bagley, who was 88, and her daughter Ada, who was very unwell. Ada had made a will leaving her estate of $1,600 in trust for her mother after her death, with the rest to be divided between 2 cousins. This will was destroyed by Ada in May 1935, and a new will was drawn up that left all the money to Dorothea Waddingham and her other half, Ronald Sullivan, when Ada and her mother had both passed away. Louisa passed away and Ada passed away in September 1935, but all was not as it seemed. Before Ada passed away, she had a visit from a family friend, and then the next day Sullivan advised Dr. H. Manfields that his patient Ada was in a coma. The doctor came out and found that Ada had passed away. As this was suspected, the doctor was not suspicious, and after gaining further details from Waddingham, he filled out a death certificate. Ada had said that she wanted to be cremated. For this to happen, 2 doctors had to sign the death certificate. The man in charge of cremations was Cyril Banks, who was also the medical officer for Halford Nottingham. Banks had never thought highly of Dorothea's so-called nursing home and knew there was no state-registered nurse on the staff as there should have been. He became suspicious at the note from Ada that authorised cremation, and he ordered a post-mortem. This is when they found traces of morphine. They then exhumed Louisa and found the same. The couple were both charged with 2 counts of murder. Waddingham's first trial started on the 4th of February 1936. Sullivan was discharged for insufficient evidence, and she was found guilty on the 27th of February. This was despite a recommendation of mercy due to her being a mother of several young children. She was sent to the gallows on the 16th of April 1936. She had confessed the crime shortly before she was sent there. Her execution was carried out at Birmingham Prison, and her hangman was Thomas Pierpoint. The case we look at next is a little bit different. There have been so many so-called celebrities who have served time at Birmingham Prison. Ozzy Osbourne is one of them. He served 6 weeks after he was arrested for breaking and entering and theft in 1966. Ashley Blake, who was a television presenter for theft and driving offences. There have been many footballers. Lee Hughes was one of these, who spent 6 years there for drinking and driving, and another footballer is who we look at next. This case is a lot lighter than the other cases that we have already covered, but I wanted to include a celebrity as so many serve small prison terms at Birmingham Prison. The footballer we look at is James Hurst. He was born on the 31st of January 1992 in the West Midlands. He came through the ranks at West Brom but declined to sign for them, and he instead got a scholarship in 2008 with Portsmouth. He never made a first team appearance for Portsmouth but did have a loan spell at a club in Iceland. He joined West Brom on a 2-year deal in September 2010, and he played for a various number of clubs. Most recently in May 2023, he signed for a lower division team. But in June 2020, he was remanded in custody by a court in Glasgow after pleading guilty to acting in a threatening or abusive manner towards police officers following a domestic incident. He coughed in officers' faces and told them he had COVID-19. He used bad language to describe a female police officer and shouted anti-Scottish abuse. He was sentenced to 160 hours unpaid community service. In August 2024, he received a 2-year prison sentence and a 5-month restraining order at the Birmingham Crown Court after he pleaded guilty to 1 count of stalking, 2 counts of harassment, and 2 of sending false communications. He remains in the prison today. And now we've covered one of the celebrities who has spent some time there, although very briefly. We now look at a very famous case of the Birmingham Six. This included Hugh Callahan, Patrick Joseph Hill, Gerard Hunter, Richard McKinney, William Power and John Walker. They were all born in Belfast apart from John Walker, who was born in Derry. All 6 had lived in Birmingham since the 1960s. The Birmingham pub bombings took place on the 21st of November 1974 and were a tribute to the IRA. Improvised devices were placed in 2 central Birmingham pubs, the Mulberry Bush pub and tavern in the town. The explosion happened at 8:25 p.m. 21 people lost their lives and 182 people were injured. The men were travelling to Belfast to attend the funeral of James McDade, who was an IRA member whom they all knew. When they reached Lancashire, they and others were subject to a special branch stop and search. The men didn't tell the police of the true purpose of their visit to Belfast. This is something that was held against them. While the search was in progress, the police were informed of the Birmingham bombings. The men agreed to be taken to the police station for forensic tests. On the morning of November 22nd, after the forensic tests and questioning by the police, the men were transferred to the custody of West Midlands Serious Crime Squad Police Unit. Callahan was taken into custody on the evening of the 22nd of November. While the men were in the custody of the police, they were deprived of food and sleep and were sometimes interrogated for as much as 12 hours without a single break. Threats were made against them and they suffered abuse, punches, dogs being let loose within a foot of them, and a mock sending to the gallows. They then confessed. On the 12th of May 1975, the 6 men were charged with murder. 3 other men, James Kelly, Mick Murray and Michael Sheehan, were charged with conspiracy. The trial began on the 9th of June 1975. At the trial, circumstantial evidence about their association with IRA members was seen. A forensic scientist used a test to claim that Hill and Power had handled explosives, although 4 of the others all were tested negative, and there was no residue of explosives on them. The jury found the 6 men guilty of murder. On the 15th of August 1975, they were each sentenced to 21 life sentences. On the 28th of November 1975, the men appeared in court for the second time, after they had been remanded in custody at Birmingham Prison. All showed bruising and other signs of ill treatment. 14 prison officers were charged with assault in June 1975, but they were all acquitted. In March 1976, their first application for appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeal. Their second full appeal was in 1991, and it was allowed. The Crown decided not to resist the appeals on the basis of new evidence of police fabrication and suppression of evidence. The successful attack on both the confession and the 1975 forensic evidence stated, in light of fresh scientific evidence which at least throws grave doubt on the tests done, it does not destroy it altogether. These convictions are both unsafe and unsatisfactory. On the 14th of March 1991, the 6 walked free. In 2001, a decade after they were released, the 6 men were awarded compensation. This ranged from $840,000 to $1.2 million. And that concludes our video today. I have seen all the suggestions from you and I will be covering those prisons. There's also a missing person video coming and a cold cases video. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.